Hi everyone, welcome back to GameMaker Cast. It's Mickey, and in this video lesson, we're going to be creating the very first enemy within our game. Now, our game is going to have 3 enemies in total, and today we're going to be working on the slime enemy. So let's roll the introduction and let's get right into it. If you're wanting to follow along, you can download the starting source code from the initial video, which you'll find in the description below. Now, for this enemy, I want to make it as simple as possible. We're going to be using a parent-child relationship. If you're not familiar with these, basically what it allows us to do is set up properties and events in our parent, which our child will automatically inherit or it will be able to use. So with that knowledge, let's create a parent. Let's create a parent called obj enemy. As well, let's also create another object, and let's call this one object enemy slime. And what I want to do on the parent object, which is the object enemy, I'm going to click on parent and go into children, and then I'm going to filter through all the way to my enemies and make sure my slime is going to be a child of this enemy itself. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to be working with the parent here. We're going to be adding some events and we're going to be adding some variables. So let's start off with a create event. And in here, we're going to try and figure out what the variables that we're going to need for all of our different enemies are. So the first thing I want to do is I want to use randomize just to make sure that whenever we are creating these enemies, we're going to have some randomization in here. First, we need the initial state, and we'll set it to state.moving. And next, let's create a region for this, and let's use hit points. So the first thing we want is a total number of hit points our enemy can have. And just like we did with the progress bars, we're going to be using a current hit points. And we're also going to be using a next hit point. So this will allow us to lerp up and down nicely between the actual health points. Now, our game wouldn't be complete without some shooting. So we'll create a new region called shooting. And for shooting, we need a shot radius before we allow our enemy to shoot. We also need a rate of fire, which will determine how fast our enemies are allowed to shoot. And then finally, we'll be using a third variable to determine whether our enemy is allowed to actually shoot. Now, the way that the AI is going to work is pretty simple. Basically, we're going to be choosing a random position X and a random position Y, and doing a check on that position, and if everything is good, then we're going to allow the enemy to move there. So let's create a region to hold these variables. We'll just call this position, and in here, we're going to use a position next X and a position next Y. I'm going to make sure I set them to the default X and Y coordinates that we're going to be throwing in our room or wherever we place them. Next, I'm going to set up some variables for my GUI. So once again, I'll create a region, and in here, I'll have a health bar padding, the height of the health bar, and then the width of the health bar. And this is based off of the sprites that we're going to be using. Now I need a target, and this is going to be the actual player. So this will be used to find the player, and our target we will set to no one. And finally, because all our enemies I don't want to be the same, I want a random starting range. And this is mainly to do with the at the top, the randomization here. So basically what I want to say is our image index, so this is going to be the subframe, is going to be a I random range between 0 and whatever the image number is -1. So these should pretty much cover all of the variables that we're going to need to create a basic enemy. So let's go and add a step event. What each enemy is going to have to do is it's going to have to find the actual player. So we could just say if the target equals no one, then what I want to do is I just want to say target is going to equal the instance find command, and we're going to be looking for the object character and find the first one. And then after that, we will exit the step event. So then the next time we come in here, we'll check the target again. And if we found the player, then we'll ignore everything in here. So this is going to be passed on to all of the different enemies that we have. So each enemy will be able to find the target properly. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want some facing direction. And I know this is going to be a lot of code at the start, but basically if our enemies are facing to the left and they're supposed to be moving to the right, I want to make sure we fix the direction that they're facing so that they're actually going to face the proper way that they're going to be moving. So we'll create a new region here, and we'll just say facing direction. And we can easily say if our current X position is bigger than the position next X, so wherever we are going to be moving to, then we could just say image xscale equals -1. Otherwise, if our X position is less than the position next X, so that's the position we're moving to, then our image xscale is just going to be equal to 1. Because we are flipping our sprites here, we just need to take into account for the origin of the sprite. If I go into my actual sprites here and I go, let's say, to the enemies and I open up the slime, you should see that all of the origin spots are set to 16 by 16. So when we do flip our sprite left and right, we're not going to have any weird artifacts or images appearing. All right, so we have the image flipping done, and now let's work on the movement. Like I said, our enemies are plain dumb, and it's really because we're going to code them this way. The rules are simple. If I'm not dead and I've made it to my position within a single pixel, then I'm going to set an alarm if it's not already set, and that alarm is going to choose the next position, and then we will just continue this process. So writing this out, we'll have a new region. We'll just call this movement, and we want to make sure that we are not already dead. And if we are not dead, then let's lerp to the position that we're supposed to be in. So we're taking our current value x, and we're moving towards the x value by 0.02%, and the same with the y itself. Now with the animation, what I want to do is as soon as I get close to my ending spot, I want to kind of slow down my image speed. So I could easily say if the distance to the point, so if I'm currently at a position and I'm within 3 pixels, then I will come within this if statement. And all I want to do is set my image speed to lerp between the current image speed and 0 at 15% each frame. So this will slow our enemy down and have a smooth transition into basically just waiting for the next command. Now, like I said in the rules, once we've hit that 1 pixel, we're going to set an alarm. So in here, we'll have a new if statement to say if the distance to point, and this is going to be the current position, is less than 1 pixel, then in here, what we want to do is we need to check to see if this alarm is already set. So we could say if alarm get, and we're going to be using the alarm 1. So if it is less or equal to -1, which means the alarm is not set, we can go ahead and set that alarm to the room speed times a random range between 0.5 and 1. Now for everything else, if I am dead already, then I'll just come in here. I'll have an else statement and I'll just set my image speed to equal 1. So that will run the death animation. While we are here, we'll come back to the create event and let's set up these hit points. This is pretty easy to do. We'll create a new region. Let's just call it hit points. And in here, all I want to do is say the hit point current is going to lerp between whatever the current value is, and then the next value at a rate of 0.2 per frame. Now let's skip the shooting for now. We'll come back to that. Let's add a new event and let's add an alarm 1. So in here, let's make sure that we're not being hit. And if we are not being hit, let's make sure our image speed is set to 1, just as a kind of a fallback. And then we want to set the position next x to be the current position plus a random range between -96 and 96. So what we need to do then is check for a wall x. And we can do this by using a collision line, and we check the current position based off of the position next and the same y position. And then what we are checking for is our object solid. And this one here is precise. We don't need to use precise, and we're going to ignore ourselves. So if this returns true, this means that we are going to run into a wall. So we'll just set the position next x to equal our current position. Now what I want to do is copy this code here. I'm going to paste it below, and I'm going to change it to the y position. And then instead of checking xy position next x, I'll check xy and position next y. And then I'll just revert the next position y to whatever the y is supposed to be if we are colliding with the object solid. All right, we're almost done. Let's move on to the draw event here. The very first thing I want to do is draw ourselves. So this is going to be whatever sprite is assigned. And now we're going to be using some of the code we already used in the hit points and stuff. Basically, we're just going to be getting the amount. So the amount is going to equal the hit points current divided by the hit points max. And this will give us a percentage between 0 and 1. And then we can use the draw health bar thick command. And let's draw at our current position -32, our y position minus the health bar padding. Then we need the width. So we'll pass in the health bar width. And we need the health bar height. And I'm going to expand this to make it a little bit bigger here. The next thing is the thickness. So I'll just use a thickness of 2. And I'm going to use a make color RGB here. And I'd probably store this in a variable. but I'll use 255, 0, and 64. And then I'm going to pass in our amount. So that will draw our health bar for us automatically. All right, so the final thing we really need to do for the parent is what happens when the bullet hits our enemy. So if we go back to the workspace, we'll do add event. And then what we want to do is come down to collision, objects. Let's go into bullet and we'll choose this bullet here. So if a bullet hits our enemy and we're already dying, we don't want anything to happen, so that we will just skip out of this function. So the first thing we need to do is remove the bullet itself. So we want to remove whatever object bullet we hit. So we could say with other, which will give us access to the actual bullet itself. And all I want to do is destroy that particular instance. Now that we've destroyed the bullet, I want to change our state of our enemy to say that we've been hit. Let's make sure that we reset whatever frame we're on. So we start at the 0 frame. And I'm going to stop whatever movement that we had. So if we were in the middle of moving, I want to basically stop and run the hit state. So I will just change my position next X and next Y to the current position that we're at. Finally, I'm going to remove the hit points, and I'll make sure we're using the hit points next here. And I'm going to have a check to make sure that if our hit points next is less or equal to 0, then we're just going to change our state into the death state. All right, so I'm going to save this. And I'm going to close everything here. And if we come over to the slime guy here, we should have a bunch of events here. If you don't have them, just close this guy and reopen them. So right now, you can see that the slime guy, he has all these events already here. So all we really need to do is set up a couple of these events differently. For instance, we need to handle the animation of the slime differently than the animation of, say, the skeleton. So for instance, I'm going to go to the step event, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to inherit this event. So anything in the step event from the parent is going to be run first, and then I can put my code below. So I'm going to put my code for the animation states here. And within these animation states, I'm just going to switch based off the state that we have. So we have a bunch of different states. We have a hit state, we have a death state, we also have a shooting state, and then finally I want a catch all state. So anytime the state is not set to one of these, it's going to run into this default thing. So what I want to do is if our slime is hit, all I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the image speed is set to 1. And now what I want to do is I'm going to switch in between two different hit animations that we have. We go to the sprites, you can see that we have a hit A and a hit B. So whenever we're hit, I want to use a function that I've written called isNot. And if the sprite index is not SPR, enemy slime hit A, or I'll copy this, it is not slime hit B, then I want to fall into this if statement. And I'll expand this. So if the sprite index is not one of these, then we're going to fall into this if statement. And all I'm going to say is make the sprite index a random between these two sprites that we have. So we're going to set the sprite either to sprite A or sprite B, as long as it is not one of them already. So this will handle our hit state for us. For the slime, for the death, it's pretty much the same. We'll set our hit speed to 1. Then we just want to set the sprite index to our death itself. Now for the shooting, once again, image speed equals 1. And let's set the sprite index to our actual shooting. For everything else, we're going to assume that we're walking. So we'll set our our sprite index to the walk itself. Now the other thing that we're going to be using, and I know this was a bug in a few different versions ago, but we're going to be using, if we go into other, an animation end. We'll switch based on our states. And if our state is going to be hitting, then we want to make sure we change the image index back to walk. We'll change our state back to moving. As for the death, we'll just destroy ourselves. And as for the shooting, we're going to cover this in a little bit. Okay, so the only thing we really need to do here, and let's assign a slime sprite here. So with all this code, let's go into our room and see what we have messed up. I'm going to go and add one just above here. I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to go up to my object and I'm going to add my slimes in here. All right, let's run our game and see what we've missed. All right, so you can see our slimes are moving around. Let's see, and they are pointing in the correct direction. Obviously, they are not shooting, but let's see what happens if I shoot one of them. Nice, so we have those effects, and you can see that once once they're moving, they automatically stop. So we don't have any errors in our code, so that's good. So let's do the final thing and get these guys actually shooting. So to get these guys actually shooting, it's pretty easy to do. We just need to figure out the direction of our player, then instantiate one of the bullets. So if we go to the step event, and let's see here, I'm going to maximize this again. We have shooting in here. And the way that this is set up is it's actually going to use the animation end here. And if we go to the sprite and we look at the shoot, and if I play this, you can see that I want as soon as this animation hits the end, I'm going to instantiate a bullet here. So we're going to be using the end animation. So I'm going to go to my level here and I'm going to make sure that I have in here a new layer, and I'm just going to call this one bullets. It's very, very important that we have that one in there. Okay, so when we are shooting, we need to figure out the direction. So we will just say p direction equals a point direction function at our current x and y, and we want to get the target x and target y. So that will give us the direction that the player is facing at. So the next thing we need to do is instantiate a bullet, and we haven't created this yet. We'll create it in just a second. So we'll say instance create layer at the current x and y. We're going to assign it to that bullets layer that we just did, and we're going to use object bullet slime, and we'll create that. The next thing we want to do is give this bullet a couple things. We want to give it a direction, which is the p direction, and then we will give it a speed. Let's say a speed of 4. And now I want to set my sprite index to SPR enemy slime. I want walk, and then our state I'm going to set back to states.moving. All right, so we need to create this bullet here. So let's go back up to our objects. Let's create a new object and let's call this obj bullet slime. Make sure that we are going to assign the correct sprite, and I have a bullet slime in here already. So in the create event, let's choose a randomize function right here. So we're going to have a rotation speed, and we'll just say random range between 3 and 6. This is how fast our eyeball is going to move. We're also going to have a time to live variable here, which will be a room speed times 3. So this is basically saying that our slime is going to fire a bullet. If the bullet lives longer than 3 seconds, then we want to get rid of it. So if it doesn't hit anything with 3 seconds, then we're just going to destroy it. We also want to change the image xscale to a random range between 0.75 and 1. So this will just give it a little bit of a different look every time we do something. We're also going to change the image x scale to equal to image y scale so that we have a nice round circle. Now in the step event, which we're going to create, we need to apply that particular image rotation. So our image angle is just going to be plus equal our rotation speed. Now we have to take 1 away from our time to live every time. And if our time to live is less or equal to 0, then we're going to start to fade out that bullet. And well, if our image alpha is less or equal than 0, then we can easily just say instance destroy. Now to finish this off, let's actually go and let's say collision objects, and we want our player. So if this bullet collides with the character, we want to access this particular character and remove one of the health points. So we could say with other, which will give us access to the object character. We'll say hit points next minus equal 1 times, and I know we haven't talked a lot about this, but if we go into the init and we go to create, you can see that we have a level variable here. So the thing I was thinking with the level is the further you get, it's going to be a bigger hit that we take if we hit one of these bullets or bullets hit ourselves. So I want to use this, and I will say times the global.level times 1.3. So if you're on the first level, you're only going to take a 30% damage, and it will just basically increase. So the final thing I want to do is remove this particular bullet, which is our slime bullet itself. Okay, now let's cross our fingers and let's run our code to see how this works. Now we should be able to move around. Let's see what happens if we get close. And they are still not shooting. So just give me a second here. All right, so they're not actually shooting because we didn't tell them to shoot. So it is my fault. Coding's hard, I know. All right, so we have the movement, we have the hit points, and sorry, I am actually in the object enemy, the parent here, and I'm in this step event. And I'm going to go to the end, and I'm going to make a new region, and I'm going to call this shooting. Now, I did say that we would come back to it, so it's my fault for completely forgetting. All right, so what we need to do for the shooting is we basically need to make sure that the state we are in is a moving state. And we need to also make sure that we have a target. So I could say if the target does not equal no one, then we can also come in here. So we're going to draw a circle. So we'll say if the collision circle of our X and Y, so where our current enemy is, we're going to draw a circle based on that shot radius, and we're going to look for the object character. We don't need anything precise, and we don't need to be included. So if we find the character within this particular circle, then we're going to set our state to the shooting state. I'm going to reset the image index to equal 0, so that will restart anything. And the next thing I want to do is just face the player. So I could say if our current position is less than the target.x position, then our image xscale equals 1. Otherwise, if the x is bigger than the target.x, then, let me fix that, our image xscale minus 1. All right, let's run this again, cross our fingers that this is going to work. All right, let me get really close here, and we have another error. All right, time to live was not set before reading the bullets. All right, so if we go to create, time live. Okay, that obviously is an error. Probably saw that. Now it's fixed, so let's run it again. All right, I can shoot. Let's see if these guys can shoot. Perfect. Wow, they're shooting everything. Okay, what happens if they hit me? So you can see my health is being taken away, and I can hit this guy as much as I want, and I should have died there, but we haven't coded that. So you can see that these guys are definitely hitting us. And if I were to run this video a long time, hopefully you would see that the AI is working, as they will not be going through this particular wall. If you find that they do, for some odd reason, basically all you need to do is you come in here and you go to your solids. And right now this is 64. You would just drag it out to be something like something a little bit thicker. And it doesn't really matter because the person's not going to see anything behind there. So this would just work just fine. Anyway, so that is the full tutorial to get the first enemy up and running. We'll keep powering through these enemies. I know it was a lot, but we have 3 more enemies to get to: a skeleton, a slime, or we just did the slime guy, and a bat. And then we can start moving on to making some of the effects and what happens when we die as well. So I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. I'd like to thank the following people for supporting me on this learning journey, and in no particular order: Victor, Ian, Robert, Andrea, Edward, Jujube84, Annie, Ashby, and Paul. And another special thank you to everyone who watches these videos, leaves comments and likes, everything. It really helps. I'm hoping that I can take this channel higher and get to producing a lot of great content for everyone. Thank you again.